let's open the floor for questions. Anybody with a question for Ron?
Jim, W-H-O-U-M-P.
Go ahead, Jim. Good evening.
Interesting discussion, Ron. I have a question for you. I'm out here in Cape Cod, up on top of a hill, which is 102 foot. That's a big hill for Cape Cod. I got water on both sides, the bay on one side, the ocean on the other. Great place for a radio station. The house was built in 1978. It only has one ground, and that goes into below the electrical box, goes into the floor. They drill through the floor, they put that in, and that was within code back in 78. My thoughts were to enhance that by putting in 4 ground rods along that side of the house. Sound like a good idea?
It sounds like an excellent idea. As soon as you mentioned where you are and the fact you got water pretty much around you, that says you don't have any problem with Earth. I mean, it's got
sand,
water and it's got salt.
The sand does get pretty dry. I'm a little bit higher up. The sand does get dry. The grounding rods at Home Depot has them in 2 flavors, galvanized steel and copper clad. Which one's better?
Copper clad.
Copper clad.
Yeah,
okay.
Only. Okay. There's a couple of versions of copper clad, so be a little bit careful there. Last I checked, they were getting their ground rods from Erico.
Okay.
And I used to be an Erico distributor, so
okay.
I know a little bit about their stuff. And they have 2 types of ground rods. They have ones that are 10 mils of copper, and they have another one that's 13. You want the 13 mil copper, and I don't remember the part number off the top of my head. If you send me an email, I'll send you back the part number.
Okay, sounds good.
Just because the Erico part number should still be on what you'll buy at Home Depot. Now, the other interesting thing, too, with ground rods is that you must hammer them in. Digging a hole or boring a hole and dropping them in doesn't really work. What you're after is a compression connection to the earth. So you've got to basically drive those ground rods in.
Drive them with like a small sludge?
You can do that, or there's mechanical equipment for driving them in.
The second question to this, I'm on the 2nd floor, makes it kind of hard to get a good ground. The coax runs overhead. If you see in the picture, it's running directly over my head to the outside wall. And at the eaves of the house, about 24 foot up, I have begins my 2 antennas. One's a 160 meter dipole, and the other is 80 through 10 end-fed half-wave dipole. I'd like to ground the end-fed half-wave, the 49-to-1 balun. It's an auto transformer. Just ground the bottom of it, bring it down 24 foot into that grounding system, which I'm about to put in. It's 22 foot long, not great. How good or bad will that be?
Not fantastic.
Okay.
But you can do something to help yourself, and that is go to a wide copper strap. That presents all kinds of issues, the least of which is just mechanically dealing with it. But the best you can do is maybe a 6-inch wide copper strap from that ground point all the way into the ground.
Okay. The strap is not aesthetically pleasing to the eye as a piece of wire which you can kind of paint.
Well, you can paint copper strap. I've done it.
Okay.
You can paint it. Part of the issue is going to be how do you mechanically secure it, so that because copper does not take well to constant motion, and it will fracture on you.
Okay.
So it's a matter 6-inch wide stuff. If you could get it under siding, that would be neat. That's usually not practical. If you put it on top of the siding, one of the successful installations I've had is you sandwich it between 2 pieces of plexiglass and then then you can anchor the plexiglass and you've got a rigid straight path. And then, of course, if it's on plexiglass, you can paint the plexiglass to blend as much as possible with whatever the outside of the structure looks like.
Okay. Anything I do has to be reviewed by my wife and approved. Signed off.
Of course.
The other quick question I have, the other antenna is a 160 meter dipole. I'm just going to put a standard lightning arrestor on it and attach it to the same wire. Good or bad?
Have to think about that a little bit. Remember, you've got to also do the power, have some form of power protection. And it needs to be on that single point ground panel. So I would, you can certainly put a protector out there. How much It just comes across the ceiling and down? Is that all it's doing?
It goes to the coax goes right across the ceiling and then out. And then I could bring the wire or braid all the way down to ground to those 4 grounding rods about to be put in.
Okay.
So it'll be connected to the electrical ground.
Okay. Yeah, what I was thinking about is you could put a protector on it because it's so long and you're probably pretty open, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would coaxial protector as a secondary protector, before it enters the structure. So yes, you could
Okay.
put one on that antenna and connect it to the copper strap or whatever you're going to the ground with. Okay. But now you also want to bring that same ground inside so that you can use it as your single point ground panel or connect it to your single point ground panel.
Okay.
Where you'll put your primary coaxial protector and your power protector.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Ron.
Okay. Next question.
Jim, W2KNG.
All right, Jim.
First of all, on pounding grounding rods is a tool that Home Depot puts out, which is a pounder. It's two handles on it. You can pound it in. So just that's whoever wants to pound ground.
That's an Erico product.
As a kid, I often heard that you can count 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 after you see the lightning, how far away it is. Is that true?
Yeah, it is.
So if you count to 1,000, it's 7 miles away.
Is it a mile exactly? I'm not sure. I have to go back and look at the speed of sound.
But it's close.
Oh, yeah, it's close. Yeah, and that's a valid way of judging.
And the second question is, you said radials on your tower. What about radials on a vertical antenna that is actually different potentials from the vertical and then the radials? Does that dissipate as well on a strike?
It does dissipate, but in many cases the radials on the antenna are right on the surface,
right,
or maybe a half an inch below or something like that. Just enough that you're not going to tear them up with the lawnmower, and they're pretty ineffective as a lightning dissipation area because they are so high. Now, if they were buried down 6 inches, 12 inches, it'd be much more effective on the lightning side. I don't know how they'd be on the antenna side.
Less effective radials. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Brian, KF2ZZ. Good evening, Brian, and welcome for the first time to Coffee Talk.
Oh, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. And Ron, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Extremely well taken. I have just 2 simplistic questions right now. The first one would be, if you have a tower that's simply grounded and you unplug the connection to your rig for simplicity's sake, and a lightning bolt hit it, what would you experience on the end of the AC and the connection to the rig?
You could have a fire.
You could have a fire. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't want to give you a short answer. I want to give you a right answer. Electrons, as they pass their way down that tower, sort of behave like cars on a freeway. They only know to follow the vehicle in front or the electron in front, and brakes, I don't think they have any, but they have plenty of energy, so they're going. And so what happens is when you disconnect the coax from your radio and say, drop it on the floor, okay, the electrons are going to follow the cable thinking there's a potential for a ground at the end of it. And then those electrons are literally going to spray off the end of that cable, and they'll spray all over the whole room looking for a ground. They're going to go into an arc again. So that's one of the reasons you don't ever want to disconnect the antenna from a piece of equipment. However, if you've gone to the trouble of having a coaxial protector on that cable, then you can disconnect from the equipment side of that coaxial protector, and you will still be safe because the end of the coax still has something that's going to short circuit it and keep the energy under control.
All right. This question: if you were having that direct lightning strike, how much would go to the actual tower ground and how much would go to the coax in terms of energy?
It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the distance between the tower and the radio. It depends on the type of coax you're using. It depends on the ground at the radio and the quality of the ground on the radio and the quality of the ground at the tower.
All right.
However, having said that, about 70% of it is going to follow the tower straight into the ground. And about 25% when the nominal installation is going to follow the coax. The shorter the coax from the tower, from the point where it leaves the tower to gets to the radio, the higher the voltage and current you're going to experience. So if it's 5 feet, that's one thing. If it's 25 feet, it's quite different.
Okay. My second question, make this very short. A lot of us have systems that are connected to computers and they still use coax to some degree. How does the coax basically that's coming in, how should that be grounded? And is there any induction here with a lightning strike?
You mentioned the computers using coax. What?
Well, if you're coming in with a coax and you're going off, let's say, on an Ethernet switch, for example, off of a
Okay.
modem or router.
Gotcha. Okay, you're looking at the 75 ohm coax feeding your internet.
Exactly.
Okay. There is a coaxial protector for 75 or 72 ohm Ethernet or Ethernet cable television. Okay, so that would be one of the protectors mounted on that single point ground panel. So
Right.
that's one piece.
If there was a lightning strike, though, how much induction would there be into the cable, or wouldn't there be any?
Oh, it would be there. You would definitely have some energy going, but I can't say how much because again, that would sort of like the tower question. It depends on so many other things, including the cable, how far the cable runs between your house and the distribution box out on the telephone pole.
Okay.
And the quality of the cable that they've used for that. Is it the standard 1.25 inch, or is it a 3 inch or something like that as a trunk? So it makes a difference there too.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a few minutes left and we have 2 raised hands. Let me go to Tom, N2AXX, and then to Dave, KD2JIP. Good evening.
Thank you, Nomar, and good evening, everybody. Ron, excellent talk, and thank you.
Thank you.
This to me, you're welcome. This to me has been very focused on DC lightning ground, and your illustrations are very, very good in terms of the perimeter ground. So where would an RF ground come in, where you keep a lead from your transceiver and your linear amplifier, your shack, to as short as possible, flat copper strap to alleviate inductance and getting that to earth, to ground? Where do you put the RF ground in? And that said, how do you alleviate the perimeter ground from being a big pickup or an inductor sucking all the RF energy back into the shack, which leads me to think of the concept of ground loop.
Okay. Well, let me just touch on the ground loop side of it first. I don't believe there is such a thing. The purpose of that perimeter ground is to give you the shunting that goes on, because it is a shorting bar in effect. And then the second, of course, is to do the tie-in with all the things that are external ground systems, like the AC and each of the towers and the generators and things like this. And then if you've got other metal objects anywhere in the vicinity, such as in our case, the propane tank and any metal fencing, you've got to bond to it so that you don't spark over against it. So, and all of that copper provides us with a capability to improve the earth connection, if you will, the earth bond. And I don't see any issues at all with a loop in there at all. No, I don't. So, no, I'm not sure I answered your question completely, though.
Yeah. Okay. Just last thing, and I think this would benefit everybody. You spoke of the copper clad, the 10 mil and the 13 mil at the big box stores like Home Depot. And I know that you're part of PolyPhaser and so on, and I'm familiar with them commercially and through my career. Where is a good source that's ham friendly to buy NEC, National Electrical Code, and UL approved parts for both the AC side and the RF side of the shack? Where's a good supplier and manufacturer?
Yeah, that's a toughie. I don't think any of the coaxial protectors have an ADC certification. I've never seen that on anything. On the AC side, in the used equipment world, there may be some PolyPhaser AC power protectors, and I know they are MET certified.
Okay.
And then one of the things that I'm thinking about is that since the AC protectors, there is right now, there is in the marketplace no inline AC protector. Everybody's just taking an MOV to ground and saying, yep, it's protected. And it's really not a very good way, because it's sharing all the energy with the piece of equipment up to the point where the MOV fires. And of course, we all know that the voltage is going to exceed that MOV for some period of time before it decides that, yeah, I should turn on. So you get a significant pulse of energy through. And the only way to reduce that is to put inductance in series with it and put the MOVs on the upside, if you will, or the dirty side of that coil. And yep, the inductance will slow it down enough, the MOV will fire, and you won't even be aware of that it's happened. And I'm thinking seriously, I want to go back and start manufacturing some of those. I did make several hundred of them a few years back, and they've been in the world, and so it probably is a case of where we probably need to go back and do that.
Well, thank you, Ron, and thank you, Nomar and Dave and Flark. Thank you.
KD2JIP, go ahead with your question.
Two real brief questions. One, is copper pipe possibly a compromise that would offer decent connection from your single point panel to ground outside?
Yep. Copper pipe is just fine.
Okay.
I mean, it's pi times the outside diameter of whatever copper you choose. That's its surface area, and that's more than 1.5 inches. So yeah, that would work just fine.
Okay, great. And my second question, this is actually, I think, a repeat of Brian KF2ZZ's question, but I think it might bear repeating. Occasionally, we have opportunities to take donations of equipment, and I have a question. Is it ever safe to leave an antenna system in place, including a coax coming into the house when we remove equipment? In other words, we're leaving an unconnected coax cable coming into the house.
Right, and there's no protector on the end of it?
Correct.
Then it's not safe. It's definitely not safe.
Okay.
Yeah, if you were to put a coaxial protector on there, at least that, the gas tube is within that protector. It will short circuit and it will control the energy. But if you don't, it's just going to spray.
Great, thank you. Tremendous presentation. Very fast hour.
Okay.
What would you suggest as the end, if you had a single line coming in, just was just discussed, and you had that connector just lying there, what could you put on that connector to absorb, or is there not such a thing?
Oh yeah, you can put something on it. I mean, the one I've talked about is you put a coaxial protector on it and make sure it's connected to a ground. And that's certainly one of the choices. The other choice would be to put a mating connector that is connected to a ground and just literally short the antenna to ground.
Okay, thank you.
So Ron, basically, follow up there with Dave's question. So basically, let's say we have an antenna switch inside the shack that you put in ground position. It grounds all the antennas, and that could also serve as a way to minimize any damage if there is no radios connected.
Well, two issues. One is that switch good for 10,000 amps? Don't struggle with the answer. It's not.
Okay.
That 10,000 amps is a lot of current.
It'll blow the little switch up.
It will certainly blow the switch up on current. It'll melt the switch on current, and it'll probably blow it up on voltage because you may be 10,000 volts running around that switch. So if you're going to develop a protection scheme, your surge protection is on the outside of that switch, which means the switch is inside in the protected zone.
Okay. Got it.
And then, of course, switching it to any position under a lightning surge it doesn't matter. I mean, the spark was 5 miles, and enough of the energy is following the cable that if you just let it open, it's going to spray into the room. So a switch that's trying to block it or ground it, chances are it'll just blow right through the switch and contaminate everything. Yeah, it's an ugly situation, unfortunately.
Perfect. Do we have one last quick question before we end tonight's coffee talk?
Well, if the antenna is grounded, let's say at the tower, or let's say we'll use that tower again as just an idea. The tower was grounded, then you have the coaxial coming in. You're saying to use a second ground at the end of that connector to the and make that a ground as well?
You do that. Now, let's back up a couple of steps, if I may. That tower that sticks up, and I think I'm trying to remember the numbers that I just put in my publication. If you take a 75-foot tower and you hit it with a 30,000 amp average lightning strike, you'll have about 200. I think I remember 235,000 volts at the top of that tower, between the top and the bottom. Let me say it that way. And that's all due to tower inductance. Now, we're not used to thinking of towers having inductance, but it does. So you're going to have 235,000 volts at the top. And if you come off the tower at, say, the 10-foot level, you're going to get 10% of that 235,000 volts following your coax cable, because the voltage distribution down the tower is rather linear. First of all, take the coax all the way to the ground, which, down to the 1 foot or less level. And then if you really wanted to, you could put a set of protectors there. They're secondary protectors. Their only purpose is to get some of the energy off the cable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we will cut this at this point. We want to thank everybody for participating, for being here with us this evening. Ron, to you, thank you very much for enlightening us here this evening. So to all of you, thank you. Good night. God bless. And